Before Elvis there was nothing. Music is everybody's possession. It's only publishers who think that people own it. When you're drowning, you don't say "I would be incredibly pleased if someone would have the foresight to notice me drowning and come and help me," you just scream. If being an egomaniac means I believe in what I do and in my art or music, then in that respect you can call me that. I believe in what I do, and I'll say it. There are only a few notes. Just variations on a theme. We reckoned we could make it because there were 4 of us. None of us would have made it alone, because Paul wasn't quite strong enough, I didn't have enough girl appeal, George was too quiet, and Ringo was the drummer. If art were to redeem man, it could do so only by saving him from the seriousness of life and restoring him to an unexpected boyishness. The whole thing died in my mind long before the rumpus started. We used to believe the Beatles myth just as much as the public and we were in love with them just the same way. But we were 4 individuals who eventually recovered our individualities after being submerged in a myth. When real music comes to me, the music of the spheres, the music that surpasses understanding, that has nothing to do with me, 'cause I'm just the channel. The only joy for me is for it to be given to me, and to transcribe it like a medium. Those moments are what I live for. I am like a chameleon, influenced by whatever's going on. If Elvis can do it, I can do it. If the Everly Brothers can do it, me and Paul can. Same with Dylan. The dream is over. I gotta get down to reality. The good old days is garbage. All you need is love. Elvis died the day he went into the army. It's just natural, it's not a great disaster. People keep talking about it like it's the end of the earth. It's only a rock group that split up, it's nothing important. You know, you have all the old records there if you want to reminisce. It was like being in the eye of a hurricane. You'd wake up in a concert and think, wow, how did I get here? The more real you get, the more unreal everything else is. I am not the Beatles. I'm me. Paul isn't the Beatles are the Beatles. Separately, they are separate. It was my Fat Elvis period. I was eating and drinking like a pig. I was depressed and I was crying out for help. It's real. And I meant it. If the Beatles or the 60s had a message, it was learn to swim. And once you've learned, swim. The Beatles were just a band that made it very, very big, that's all. Barney Kessel is incredible. He's just amazing. Nobody can play guitar like that. I always liked the studio best, once I got the hang of it and the control. I like it because it's complete control. The world went mad and used us as an excuse. Lack of feeling in an emotional sense is responsible for the way some singers do our songs. They don't understand and are too old to grasp the feeling. Beatles are really the only people who can play Beatle music. I love commercial music. I can dissect it and criticize it with any critic in the business. But without any thought, I just enjoy it. It's folk music. That's what I'm doing, folk music. I'm not intellectualizing it, and making it into a phony art form. I'm just doing the music I enjoy. My original idea for the cover was better, decapitate Paul, but he wouldn't go along with it. At the record company meeting, Paul just kept mithering on about what we were going to do, so in the end I just said, I think you're daft. I want a divorce. In Paris in 1964 was the first time I ever heard Dylan at all. Paul got the record, The Freewheel in Bob Dylan, from a French DJ. For 3 weeks in Paris we didn't stop playing it. We all went potty about Dylan. It, in my life, was the first song that I wrote that was really, consciously about my life. Up until then, it had been all glib and throwaway. I don't bother so much about the others' songs. For instance, I don't give a damn about how something is doing in the charts. I watch Come Together, The Flip Side, because that's my song. We thought being offered the MBE, member of the Order of the British Empire, was as funny as everybody else thought it was. Why? What for? We didn't believe it. It was a part we didn't want. We all met and agreed it was daft. I felt that film, Let It Be, was set up by Paul for Paul. That is one of the main reasons the Beatles ended. I can't speak for George, but I pretty damn well know we got fed up of being sidemen for Paul. After Brian died, that's what happened. That's what began to happen to us. The camera work was set up to show Paul and not anybody else. And that's how I felt about it. I started being me about the songs, not writing objectively, but subjectively. I think it was Dylan who helped me realize that, not by any discussion or anything, but by hearing his work. We never write anything with themes. We just write the same rubbish all the time. I only ever asked two people to work with me as a partner. One was Paul McCartney and the other Yoko Ono. Paul and me were the Beatles. We were always going to dump him when we found a decent drummer. The whole Beatle thing was just beyond comprehension. When Help came out, I was actually crying out for help. Most people think it's just a fast rock and roll song. I didn't realize it at the time. I just wrote the song because I was commissioned to write it for the movie. But later, I knew I really was crying out for help. If I had the capabilities of being something other than I am, I would. It's no fun being an artist. You know what it's like, writing, it's torture. Oh. Darling was a great one of Paul's that he didn't sing too well. I always thought I could have done it better. It was more my style than his. He wrote it, so what the hell, he's going to sing it. I've always thought there was this underlying thing in Paul's Get Back. When we were in the studio recording it, every time he sang the line "Get back to where you once belonged," he'd look at Yoko. We were cowards when we sacked him. I don't know if I want to record together again. I go off and on it. In the old days, when we needed an album, Paul and I got together and produced enough songs for it. Nowadays, there's three of us writing prolifically and trying to fit it all into one album. I think it's the best thing I've ever done. I think it's realistic, and it's true to the me that has been developing over the years. I like first-person music. I don't mind people putting us down, because if everybody really liked us, it would be a bore. You've got to have people putting you down. It doesn't give any edge to it if everybody just falls flat on their face saying, "You're great." We enjoy some of the criticisms as well. They're quite funny, some of the clever criticisms, not the ones that don't know anything, but some of the clever ones are quite fun. I don't miss it. I'm glad it happened, but I don't miss it. Without Jimmy Dean, the Beatles never would have existed. Music's all right, John, but you'll never make a living out of it. From our earliest days in Liverpool, George and I on the one hand and Paul on the other had different musical tastes. Paul preferred pop-type music and we preferred what is now called underground. This may have led to arguments, particularly between Paul and George, but the contrast in tastes, I'm sure, did more good than harm, musically speaking, and contributed to our success. And Paul hits this chord, and I turn to him and say, "That's it. Do that again." In those days we really used to absolutely write like that, both playing into each other's noses. The thing is, in America, it just seemed ridiculous. I mean, the idea of having a hit record over there, it was just something you could never do. My life with the Beatles had become a trap. I always remembered to thank Jesus for the end of my touring days. If I hadn't said that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus and upset the very Christian Ku Klux Klan, well, Lord, I might still be up there with all the other performing fleas. God bless America. Thank you, Jesus. A more interesting question is not why did they break up? But would they have gotten back together? There's always a chance we'd work together again. But I can't see us touring. I just see us making records. Before Cliff, Richard, and the Shadows, there had been nothing worth listening to in British music. We're more popular than Jesus now. I don't know which will go first, rock and roll or Christianity. We were all on this ship in the 60s, our generation, a ship going to discover the new world. And the Beatles were in the crow's nest of that ship. One has to completely humiliate oneself to be what the Beatles were. It happened bit by bit, until you're doing exactly what you don't want to do with people you can't stand, the people you hated when you were 10. I didn't leave the Beatles. The Beatles have left the Beatles, but no one wants to be the one to say the party's over. The Beatles is over, but John, Paul, George, and Ringo, God knows what relationship they'll have in the future. I don't know. I still love those guys. Because they'll always be those people who were that part of my life. Everything I've ever done is out. I don't have boxes of unreleased stuff. There's nothing in the files. I can never keep anything unless I don't like the sound of it or it didn't work. If I can sing it to an engineer, I can sing it to anyone. The idea of being a rock and roll musician sort of suited my talents and mentality. The freedom was great, but then I found out I wasn't free. I'd got boxed in. The whole Beatle thing is just beyond comprehension. Subconsciously I was crying for help. We announced the birth of a conceptual country, Newtopia. Citizenship of the country can be obtained by declaration of your awareness of Newtopia. Newtopia has no land, no boundaries, no passports, only people. Newtopia has no laws other than cosmic. All people of Newtopia are ambassadors of the country. As two ambassadors of Newtopia, we ask for diplomatic immunity and recognition in the United Nations of our country and our people. The writing of the Beatles, or John and Paul's contribution to the Beatles in the late 60s, had a kind of depth to it, a more mature, more intellectual approach. We were different people, we were older, we knew each other in all kinds of different ways than when we wrote together as teenagers and in our older 20s. I resent performing for frisking idiots who don't know anything. We're more popular than Jesus Christ now. For a long time I wasn't listening to music, to the rock and roll stuff on the radio, because it would cause me to get sweaty. It would bring back memories I didn't want to know about, or I would get that feeling that I'm not alive cause I'm not making it. And if it was good, I hated it cause I wasn't doing it. And if it was bad, I was furious cause I could have done it better. People think the Beatles know what's going on. We don't. We're just doing it. Where do people get off saying the Beatles should give $200 million to South America? You know, America has poured billions into places like that. It doesn't mean a damn thing. After they've eaten that meal, then what? It lasts for only a day. After the $200 million is gone, then what? It goes round and round in circles. You can pour money in forever. After Peru, then Harlem, then Britain. There is no one concert. We would have to dedicate the rest of our lives to one world concert tour. And I'm not ready for it. Not in this lifetime, anyway.